If you don't know me, I'm Allison. I normally work with the kids, with their...
That's a huge job, Allison.
I said normally work with the kids. Yes, it is a huge job, just in case you didn't know. But they're great, and I like it. So I was trying to figure out how to go about doing this, so I figured a good place to start would be paying more attention to other sermons. Not that I wasn't listening to them before, but really just kind of focusing in on the structure, how they're built, the journey that listeners are supposed to be taken on as they are listening. And so I realized that it's shifted a little bit from the classic 3 bullet point structure that I grew up with, where there's like 3 big points. Maybe they all spell a word or start with the same letter. I did some Googling about it actually, and I found this advice. It's at soulpreaching.com. This is actually a 3 bullet point article about how to create the 3 bullet point structure. So really the meat of the article is hit right there at point 2, where it talks about how to take your topic, you give it a cool name, you round up some really good points about it, and you present it effectively. My favorite part, you probably can't read it, but it's down at the bottom where it says, the preacher should attempt to make the points of the sermon progressively intense so that the second is more emotionally invested than the first, and the third is just this extreme heartbreaking experience. This is not really my style, so I'm not going to go this direction. I'm gonna try my best though, and if you don't like it, Brandon's talking second service, so you can try again. So we're in the midst of a year-long series called Shake It Up. And we've been exploring how to look at opportunities to view things differently than we normally might, to get past the surface level and to uncover some real spiritual truths. So with that in mind, I'm going to continue on the mini-series that we're in, which is called Changing Your Channel. And I'm going to get you all a little better acquainted with this guy. You probably know him, right? I even put him in black and white for you guys. So in case you don't know, this is Kevin Spacey. He's pretty iconic. He's been in over 50 films. He's highly decorated. I found out he's actually an honorary Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire. So I thought that was pretty cool. He got in there for services to theater, arts education, and international culture. He actually made it pretty big in stage theater before he was in any movies at all. So he's really involved in that scene, which I thought was really neat. Most recently, though, he's joined up with the Netflix sensation House of Cards, and he's the lead actor. And the show has just taken off. It received 9 Emmy Award nominations its first season, which is really incredible because it's the first online-only show that's gotten any nominations of that kind. So ever since then, it's gotten more nominations and awards all involving words like outstanding and best. And so I want to explain to you what it is about this show that's so captivating. I know because I've seen every episode multiple times. But for those of you that haven't, I'm going to get you as caught up as I can in just a few minutes. So the show House of Cards follows the story of this guy, Frank Underwood. He's a ruthless politician. He's rising to the top. He began season 1 as House Majority Whip, which is a position of some influence and power. Politically speaking, whips are the ones who basically make sure that everyone is voting and acting in accordance with the party line. So they resort to bribes and threats, all sorts of things to keep people from going rogue. I found out that the term it actually comes from hunting jargon. The term whipping in is to keep the hound dogs from wandering off from the hunt. So you can kind of see the parallel there, keeping the hound dogs or politicians rounded in so that they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing. So Frank fits perfectly into this role. He has no qualms whatsoever about lying, manipulating, setting people up to fail, just doing all sorts of terribly mean things to get the goal done. So his ascension to power, it's just remarkable. It's what makes the show so interesting. He makes cutthroat, unapologetic, strategic moves. And despite a few setbacks here and there, he's obviously in control of the situation. He kind of stops to talk to the audience, sort of film noir style a lot, where he's just kind of filling us in on his master plan. And so we're watching him sneakily rise the ranks, and he actually makes it all the way to president. Sorry for the spoiler, should have given an alert, but there's so much good stuff going on in there, you should get caught up on your own. But when he gets to president, things take a turn. He's hungrily raiding congressional funds, he's dealing with Russia, he's trying to create this lasting legacy and sort of leaving the country by the wayside. People are losing confidence in him, he's backtracking, his allies are turning against him, and he's becoming engulfed in the stress of just trying to stay in control, not trying to do the right thing, just staying in control. And so I have a very telling clip right here. It shows his reaction after one particularly tense conversation.
What are you looking at?
So, very ominous. That's not the comment of a man who is calm, cool, collected, got it all together, and you can see that he's kind of plummeting into crisis mode. So, with all this in mind, there's a guy in the Bible that Frank actually reminds me of. And he's someone we often view as a Bible hero. He's definitely one of the main patriarchs and highly respected, and that guy is actually Jacob. I have always struggled with the stories of Jacob that we read in the Bible. When you step back and you look at the whole Old Testament narrative, Jacob is one of those key guys. He's got a lot of women, he got a name change, he got covenants made with him and lots of blessings and kids, and he's just generally an important guy. But when you look closer at it, he was really this shady character. He dealt with a lot of shady people, told a lot of lies along the way, and it feels like he connived his way into being the father of God's chosen people. To get you on the same page as me, we'll take a Reader's Digest version look at this character. From day one, Jacob was causing trouble. He was fighting with his twin brother Esau before they were even born. So much so that their mother Rebecca got concerned about the situation, and she said, if it's going to be like this, I'm not so sure I want to be pregnant. So she asked God, what's going on, and he had this to say to her: 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples will be separated from within you. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. I can't imagine this is really comforting information for a new mom to be receiving, but that's what happened. The twins were born, and it seems like Jacob desperately wanted to be first because he came out clutching his brother's heel. And that's actually where his name comes from. It can be translated to he takes by the heel or he cheats. And he certainly did cheat his way into getting a lot of things that were meant for his, technically speaking, older brother. There are very few stories in the Bible that baffle me more than the story of the birthright stew. If you have not heard this story, I will get you filled in because it's really a doozy. Esau's been working out in the field. He comes home, he sees Jacob making some stew, and he wants some so desperately that he agrees to give Jacob his birthright for a bowl of this stew. Now, maybe it's just me. I know I have a little bit of a culinary background, but I have a hard time paying $5 for soup I know I can make myself. I would not give away my entire birthright because birthrights were a huge deal back then. If you had the birthright, you got double the inheritance, which is worth a lot more than soup, and if your father died, you became the head of the household. You had to deal with taking care of your mother and your siblings and the household and dealing with all of those things. It was a huge responsibility. So, mind-boggling situation. So their brotherly struggle continued with another almost laughable situation. It would be laughable if it didn't end so poorly. Basically, their dad was in pretty poor health. And he wasn't sure how much longer he was going to be around. And it was tradition in those times to give a blessing to your oldest child. And so with the help of his mom, Jacob put on this ridiculous disguise involving his brother's clothes and some sheepskin, and this supposedly was effective in deceiving his blind father into thinking that he was actually his older brother Esau, and gave him the blessing meant for his older brother. And then Esau comes home and he has a meltdown about the situation, and he wants a blessing too. And for some reason, this is the best his dad can come up with. Indeed, your home will be away from the richness of the earth and away from the dew of the sky above. You will live by your sword, but you will serve your brother. And when you grow restless, you will tear his yoke from your neck. So that's a great blessing, right? That's what we all want. Esau becomes understandably infuriated at this, and it's such an odd situation that it almost feels like there's no way his dad didn't know, and it kind of feels like maybe a scheme to get Esau out of the will, maybe? Theologian Frederick Buechner put it this way: old Isaac seemed to take the news so much in his stride that you almost wonder if perhaps in some intuitive way he knew it had been Jacob all along and blessed him anyway, believing in his heart that he would make the worthier successor. In fact, only Esau behaved as you might have expected. He was so furious at having been cheated, he vowed to kill Jacob the first chance he got. So, of course, Jacob's parents, who had just blessed him and supported him in this deceit, didn't want that to happen. So his mom arranged a relocation for Jacob, sent him up north to live with his uncle Laban. And on the way, something very interesting happened. You guys know what this is, right? This is Cat's Cradle. This is Jacob's Ladder. This is a Bible favorite, super popular story. This is the story where he falls asleep and he sees angels climbing up and down a ladder to heaven, and God makes these wonderful promises to him about how he'll have lots of descendants. He says, behold, I'm with you. I'll keep you wherever you go. I'm not going to leave you until I do what I promised that I would do for you. And it's a very exciting story, but it's not often told in the context of what just happened in Jacob's life. It's interesting to see God showing his support in the face of this whole situation. And that's something we're going to revisit a little bit later. But for now, we'll continue on our narrative. Jacob is on his way to meet his uncle. And when he got there, he met his match. His uncle Laban was I don't know if you can see that, it's a little small. It says, congratulations, Jacob and Rachel. Rachel's crossed out and it says Leah. Uncle Laban was pretty shisty, and he was very eager to get as much work out of his nephew as he could. Jacob got a little love struck with one of Laban's daughters, and his uncle agreed to let them marry in exchange for 7 years of hard labor. In another confusing turn of events, he got tricked into marrying the wrong daughter after all that time, and then was made to work another 7 years to get the one he really wanted. At all this time, Jacob was managing his uncle's livestock, and it was really flourishing. Everything was going really well for him. But it seems like maybe it wasn't without an ulterior motive. After his work commitment was completed, and he had 11 kids and 2 wives, and his wives had 2 maids that he also had kids with, and there's just a big old family going on. Jacob was ready to finally move back to his homeland. And an agreement was reached between the 2 men that Jacob would be able to take a part of the flock of sheep with him. Everyone that was speckled or spotted, and then this battle began of basically the 2 men trying to out-sneak each other to make sure the other guy ended up with crappy sheep. And it got out of control. Laban took away any sheep that was patterned, looked like it could possibly have patterned children, gave them to his sons, which were like 3 days away. And then Jacob started this kind of weird natural selection breeding process to try to make sure that he got all these strong sheep. It just got crazy, and the whole thing reached a peak when Jacob and his entire family and all his possessions and a bunch of sheep ran away. and just fled without telling Laban that they were leaving. So Laban, of course, is mad, and he goes to chase them down. But here's the crazy thing. God intervenes in defense of Jacob. Maybe this is not the strongest message of support we've ever seen. It says, this is Laban talking to Jacob. I have the power to do you harm, but the God of your father told me last night, be careful that you neither bless nor curse Jacob. So, it's kind of middle of the road as far as encouragements go, but it was definitely enough to diffuse the situation. They had some verbal back and forth, and an agreement was pretty much reached that they would go their separate ways and wouldn't bother each other anymore, and that was going to be that. So it was kind of a close call, and without that message from God in there, it really could have turned out very differently and continued to escalate. So Jacob lived to fight another day. And this is where we're going to come to the heart of the situation, the event that all of this has really been building toward. Here's this tricky man. He's striving to obtain everything that he could from before the moment he was even born, and seemingly with God's support. And he's finally going to have a moment where everything starts to fall out from underneath him. So you remember Esau, we talked about him just a little bit ago, the brother he swindled the birthright and blessing from. Jacob really can't travel home without crossing paths with him. He knows it's time to face what happened, and he starts sending gifts on ahead and probably practicing his speech in his head. And I wonder if he thought all that would really help, or if he was still being consciously manipulative at this point. In fact, I wonder a lot of things about this story. It bothers me how well things are going for Jacob. I don't know if it bothers you too. But, he's tricking everyone, he's lying to everyone, and God is just right there beside him. It doesn't feel right. You might not know, but during the school year, I work as a teacher's aide at a very conservative private Christian school. And on top of standard subjects, they also have a specific Bible class, which is devoted to teaching about all the Old Testament history, all the kings and important people. And there was a question on a third grade worksheet about Jacob. And it said, who did God want to have the birthright? And that's what initially got me wondering about this whole topic. It kind of sent all this into motion. The right answer, according to the Reformed Presbyterians, is that God wanted Jacob to have it all along. And that doesn't really sit well with me. I don't like that answer. I don't know. Maybe some of you like that answer, and that's fine, but I don't like it. I feel like God could have done the same exact thing whether Jacob had done all that trickery or not. The same storyline could have played out. The blessing probably would have been different if Esau got it anyway. The whole thing, it just seems like a moot point. It's just a weird thing to ask and a weird answer to get. And I was relieved to know that I'm not the only one who feels this way. Pastor Tom was kind enough to lend me a couple books on this topic, and one of them was by Elie Wiesel. If that name sounds familiar and you can't quite put your finger on it, it's this guy. If you're from my generation, you probably read his book Night in high school. It's about his times during the Holocaust. Sorry, I got lost. He went through the Holocaust, and after surviving that, he went on to become a very prolific activist. He was a writer, he was a professor, just very entrenched in Jewish studies and becoming an authority on that. So keeping in mind that this comes from a very, very personal perspective and a very Jewish perspective, these were his questions. Without Rebekah's intervention, without her intuition, her objectively immoral ruse, Isaac surely would have given his blessings not to Jacob, but to Esau. Then whose descendants would we be? What if Isaac had uncovered the stratagem? Are we then nothing but the result of a fortuitous encounter? Could Israel then not have been at all, or else been Esau? These are questions from a different perspective than mine, but they're still very good and valid questions. And it speaks to this concept that we want equity, we want answers, we want to know why is everything happening the way it's happening. On one hand, Jacob is just this prime example of what an Israelite or a Christian is. Someone who just doesn't get it and keeps falling away and making the same mistakes over and over, and God makes something good of it. This picture of failure into perfection. So maybe it wouldn't be as symbolic if Jacob was this put together guy. Maybe he needs to be this sketchy, seedy character. But then there's this other cynical side of me that says, what about Esau? He's a little bit dopey, honestly. I see that. He's got some issues, but he's not really that bad of a guy, And, why wasn't he chosen? And his crummy brother just played him and got all the good stuff, and it just bothers me. And these are questions that I haven't answered, and I haven't seen them satisfactorily answered anywhere. I don't know, but I think they're questions worth asking, because I think they're at the heart of human struggle with God and with spirituality and with the whole concept of it. They may seem like moot points, but they matter. And I think the next part of Jacob's story kind of reinforces that and shows us that they are questions worth having. The night before meeting with Esau, Jacob was approached by a mysterious character. Some people think it's an angel, some people think it's God himself. Either way, it was definitely at least a messenger of God. And Jacob wrestled and fought with him all through the night until morning began. And Jacob fought it out till all his strength was pretty much gone, and then all God had to do was touch the socket of his hip to deliver this crippling blow. Frederick Buechner put it more beautifully than I could at the end of his message, The Magnificent Defeat. And this is how he described it. The stranger has simply held back until now, letting Jacob expend all his strength and almost win, so that when he was defeated, he would know that he truly was defeated. So he would know that not all the shrewdness, will, brute force that he could muster were enough to get this. Jacob will not release his grip, only now it's not a grip of violence but of need, like the grip of a drowning man. The darkness has faded just enough so that for the first time he can dimly see his opponent's face. And what he sees is something more terrible than the face of death. It's the face of love. It is vast and strong, half ruined with suffering and fierce with joy. The face of man flees down all the darkest of his days until at last he cries out, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Not a blessing he can have now by the strength of his cunning or the force of his will, but a blessing that he can only have as a gift. I don't know why life played out differently for Jacob and for Esau. I don't really know what Esau was up to all the years that the story is following Jacob's plot line. But I do know that the brothers reconciled and that some sort of heart change happened on both sides. This is what happened when they met. Esau ran to meet him, embraced him, hugged his neck, and kissed him. Then they both wept. So Esau ran to meet his brother, and all the hatred melted away, and Jacob came to his brother with a humbled attitude. And he said something quite interesting. He says, "Now that I have seen your face and you have accepted me, it is as if I have seen the face of God." For I've seen your face, and it's like seeing the face of God. That's something he actually might know something about. So many times we can see God's face and love through other sometimes unexpected people in our lives if we stop looking for ways to manipulate them and fit them into our kingdom and the way that we want things to be. Our kingdoms are nothing more than a house of cards. They're destined to blow away with the wind. They're not permanent. They're not strong. They're nothing. We've been designed to live in a community where we present as God's face, his hands and his feet to everyone around us, serving and loving our neighbors, whoever they may be. There's enough hate in this world. There's enough brokenness. And I think sometimes Christians can spend so much time trying to get 100% on the worksheet that we miss the lesson that's trying to be taught. People are trying to construct these irrefutable theologies, and I know it's not It's not a waste of time to learn, to explore, to gain knowledge. Knowledge is crucial, it's important. But what is the point? What does it all mean if we don't love the people around us? Jesus himself said, I don't have a slide for it, but Jesus himself said, he said this. A Pharisee asked him, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" This is in Matthew 22. Some of you have probably heard it before. Pharisees, by the way, they have this reputation for being very letter of the law. And they're precisely the guys that are all about what does the law say? What can I get away with? What can I not get away with? And they did not like Jesus. They thought he was radical. They thought he broke the laws. They thought he was nothing but trouble. And they tried to trap him all the time because they didn't care about the bigger message. They cared about doing what they thought was right and about worshiping their theology. So Jesus replied to him, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." So if we're not looking at stories in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament through the lens of being commanded to love God and to love other people, then we're doing it wrong. And I think that's the lesson that we're supposed to learn from Jacob. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for loving us and for giving us the capacity to love you and to love others back. And help us to just keep sight of that and to just do our best and to remember you and your sacrifice and your gift every single day. In Jesus' name, amen.